Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, returning guest, friend of the pod. Hope he considers himself friend of the pod. And most importantly, my neighbor here in, I'll just say Brooklyn. Leave it general. We don't want people stalking him because he is something of a celebrity. Michael Scotto of HoopsHype. How are you, man?
What's up, brother? You can be considered a paisan, a friend, definitely a neighbor, close enough. I thought that was you that almost backed into me with your car the other day, but I didn't want to say nothing. And then, we'll get you out of the game in Brooklyn Bridge Park one of these days when I get the band together. But it's good to be on. Hope the summer's treating you well so far, and Andrew, your producer, as well.
Summer's been so far so good. I'm in the middle of a couple different things. Got a few balls in the air, as they say. But no, I feel like, let's start there. I feel like it's been a fairly quiet summer as far as our line of work is concerned. Let's start with this because I said I wanted to touch on the Philly situation and the Portland situation too, both of which you've done reporting on. And I feel like, the Harden trade demand came out, and I forget when the Lillard trade. Well, I guess essentially the trade demand, but they were very close together in time. And there's been little rumblings here and there, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of movement. So I'll just start by asking you, based on what kind of you're hearing and everything you know of right now, do you feel like the league is in a standstill, or do you think that there's a chance that within the next couple, let's say, weeks, we're going to be getting an alert from you that something big is going down?
Look, I definitely think the league is in a standstill right now between Miami with Lillard and Philadelphia with James Harden. A lot of guys on back end of rosters are eagerly anticipating / hoping something gets done soon. Because right now there's so many people out there that are waiting, that are just on these minimum offers that they don't want to take. They're waiting for something better. There's still some good quality players out there. And some guys are wondering if, maybe they'll get looped into the trade talks. I think one example of that is Jaime Jaquez, who Miami took in the first round. He can't be traded yet because of when he signed his contract. I believe his date is July 31st. Okay. So, that's something to keep an eye on as well in those talks. But, at the end of the day, the other scenario there is, I've touched on it, I know others have certainly as well, but where does then Tyler Herro land? Does he land in Brooklyn? Does he land in Utah? Does he land in Toronto? Does he land somewhere else? I do think that he can, bring back a first round pick. I know he's got a higher salary, and a lot of teams are worried about the second apron, except for Matt Ishbia, who could care less.
He doesn't know what an apron is.
Yeah. The only apron that Matt Ishbia is worried about is maybe the bib or something when he's sitting down for dinner. That's about it. He's not worried about a tax apron. That's for sure. He's all in, and he should be with the Suns after getting Durant. But, Jonathan, for the league, it's just really waiting to see, with Harden and Lillard. And I think I'll start with Harden first because I did more recent reporting on that with PJ Tucker's name coming up in some of those talks. A couple things there. Number one, Harden took a lot less money to stay in to sign with Philly previously, so they could bring in PJ Tucker, which they did. And there was a thought from people around the league certainly that Daryl Morey, his buddy, his longtime biggest supporter of anybody in the league, would eventually take care of him later on in the back end, which was supposed to be now. That didn't happen. And so, you look at the moves for Philadelphia this offseason, and they lose George Niang, they lose Shake Milton, they lose Jalen McDaniels, and they, quadruple up at center with now Embiid, Mo Bamba, Montrezl Harrell, and you retain Paul Reed in restricted free agency. Okay. I don't know if, when you look at the roster, they're not a better team. And if you trade Harden, you're certainly not going to be better with, the reported packages that are out there kind of from the Clippers. You hear all these names about, whether it's Robert Covington, Morris, even if it's Terrence Mann, a pick. To me, I don't I don't see that moving the needle as much for them. And if you're PJ Tucker, either way, he's not really going to control his destiny like that. But certainly for the Clippers, they would like to bring him in, a rugged defender and a guy that can lock up multiple positions. He shoots the corner three. That's pretty much what he does at this point in his career. And James is familiar with him and is as a good friend. So, I think you're in still a bit of a standstill there. For Philly, it's how much are you going to tolerate a disgruntled Harden in camp? We've seen him when he wants his way out in Houston. Brought out I know they joked about the fat suit. He definitely came in out of shape. And then, I've had a couple of big games and then, made his displeasure known in press conferences in Brooklyn. I remember the Sacramento game vividly.
Were you at that game?
No, it was in Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
I just remember him nonchalantly, we'll put it, playing defense, and it was pretty clear. He looked like a traffic cone. You could just go right by it. So it was known at that point he didn't want to be there either. So now if he goes to camp in Philly, Philly's had the Ben Simmons issue in camp previously. To go from that to now Harden potentially a couple of years later, if they don't get it done, trade done in the offseason would be interesting. But Daryl Morey, for those of your listeners that are watching on video, and I'll narrate it for like the audio listeners. He starts the negotiation outside the frame. Okay. Then he brings it in maybe to the top corner. Then somewhere, if you're lucky, you're going to get a little bit lower than that. And right now he's in a bit of a tough spot because if you're moving Harden, it has a domino effect, which I'm sure you probably wanted to get into, but
let's stick with that for a second, because the most fascinating part of all of this, to me at least, is everybody assumed that Morey, goes without saying, was going to want to trade Harden for something, that he could essentially replicate, maybe not what Harden does because he's a very unique player, but like something close to it. But then he doubles down and he goes on the record and he says it on the radio show that he went on in Philly, where he's like, well, we're either getting a star back or pieces that we could trade for star, which to me, the only translation as far as, and you brought up the Clippers, is, well, that means Terrence Mann and maybe 2 first-round picks. Because to me, that's the only package that is good enough that if you're going to then turn around and maybe flip it at the deadline or something for whoever the next, disgruntled star is. And even then, that might be a little light. So, I'm from the outside looking in, and obviously a lot of people around the NBA have already, been talking about this. To me, it seems like a situation of hoop links first. And maybe that's simplifying things between the Clippers and Daryl Morey, because if you're the Sixers, what's worse? Like Harden is out there on the court playing like he did when he wanted out of Houston and then later when he wanted out of Brooklyn, or Harden, being in a situation where the Sixers are like, you know what, stay home. Is that even an option? To me, that situation is more untenable than the idea that the Clippers are going to have to go into this season with, whether it's Russell Westbrook as a starting point guard, dealing with your usual injuries from Paul George or Kawhi, because they're used to that. So it's like they know they could exist in a world without Harden. The Philly thing to me is extraordinarily untenable, but I'm curious your opinion on that.
Well, that's fair. First of all, if you're the Clippers, you've had 2 players that haven't been able to stay healthy either, in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. I get the thought of bringing in Harden and forming a big 3. Makes sense for both Harden, for a guy who's trying to win a championship, and for the Clippers. I think to your point, LA, I guess, of the 2 teams can certainly wait on it more. But for Philly, how much better are you with Covington, Morris, potentially Terrence Mann, a pick now? And then the flip side of that is, I think the real domino, I'll say, is how does then Joel Embiid feel about it?
Well, that's what we're getting at here.
To me, that's as much, because clearly Philly, in some form, hasn't wanted to go, whether it's the money, the years, whatever you want to call it. They haven't wanted to go where James Harden and his camp have wanted to go in free agency and on a new deal. So, and you know that going in. It's why like he picked up the option. So then, you know, with Embiid, it's like, I would think on paper, they're certainly better with Harden than without. But Jonathan, the thing that gets me is either way, they lost a lot of good depth pieces. I still think
they're not as good.
They're not as good. I think losing Niang hurts. Milton, you know, whatever. I've seen Philly Twitter sometimes say whatever, but McDaniels is a good enough rotation player
they
too.
Just traded for him. I mean, unless Maxey takes a leap, which I think Maxey's an interesting player. I mean, to some extent, I wonder if we need to see him not alongside Harden to see what he's really capable of. Kind of a little bit like Emmanuel Quickley when he actually got a chance to start, you know, a couple of games Jalen Brunson was out, whatever else the case may have been this year, you know, a chance to shine. Maxey, I wonder if he needs to be, you know, out of the shadow. Other than that, though, to me, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, whatever happens this year, I still think, and I love Joel Embiid. I would do anything to get Joel Embiid in a.
So would the Knicks.
Listen, you don't have to sell me on it. He's been my guy for years. Listeners of this show know I've been cooking up fake Joel Embiid trades, you know, since before we were on YouTube. But like, you would think that he's at least going to give them until next summer, because that's the other thing we keep hearing, right? I mean, and let me ask you, this idea that the Sixers, I don't know, is it a backup plan? Or the backup to the backup plan? Well, at least we're going to have, you know, it could be $60-70 million, whatever it is in cap space next summer. Okay, fine. But you know the list of potential free agents as well as I do. The likelihood that those guys, there's going to be a ton of guys actually out there in free agency that aren't going to extend, A, and B,
sure,
that they're going to be the right fits, that they're going to want to go to Philly. That's, I don't know. To me, this is all walking a tightrope.
Okay, so with that, couple things. One, if you are trying to maximize cap space, then you would think you would try to put PJ Tucker in the trade, as I alluded to previously.
Absolutely, yes.
Number one. Number two, regarding the cap space, well, Daryl could also try to use it to take on a contract that is maybe not deemed as valuable to another team.
Like Ben Simmons.
I mean, you know, look, there's been a lot of talk of, I'm just throwing an example.
Sure. Not reporting, to be clear.
Correct. Though I'm sure the aggregators don't care. You know, like a guy like a Zach LaVine with a high salary, for example, has been dangled out there. So if you're a team with cap space down the line, you could theoretically absorb that. I don't know if that, I'm not saying that's Philly's goal there, but just because you have cap space doesn't mean you got to be the Houston Rockets and sign all free agents. You can use it to, you know, trade for guys. So, but going, you know, for your Knicks listeners, you know, our people locally here. I mean, I think the elephant in the room is everybody, including the Knicks, are like monitoring this very much so, because if Embiid gets disgruntled, we've seen in this league how players can try to force their way out and try to steer it towards a destination they want. Keith Pompey was recently on Sirius XM radio talking about potentially Joel Embiid, you know, to the Knicks a little bit if it was a possibility, which could be down the line. He talked about it, and he's their beat guy, you know. So I mean, it's what I would say is the more smoke you get, the more there could be fire. But the Knicks have certainly wanted a star. They have been clamoring for a star, especially if they're not finalizing a Donovan Mitchell trade. So,
well, we got one star now.
Jalen Brunson.
Yes, exactly. You got to call a spade here.
Yeah, but you know what, Jonathan? You got to maximize Jalen Brunson now, in my opinion. Like
100%, absolutely.
Jalen's in his prime, and I think
time is now.
You know, you're right. Jalen Brunson's an all-star caliber player, but that's great. If you want to maintain where you got in the playoffs last year or do better, you got to improve the team. And we know this from 2 years ago. We've seen what Julius Randle does in the playoffs. You know, Mitchell Robinson had a great series against the Cavaliers.
Then he was exposed.
Then you go to the next round. It's okay, a little different ball game.
Yep.
So still a good defensive center and fits what they do well. You know, I think the other question for the Knicks to figure out is, which RJ Barrett are you getting? Are you getting the guy that, you know, worked with Drew Hanlon on his shot, his trainer, and then came out in the most recent playoff series and was dropping 20 plus points a game on efficient shooting from the field. And his 3-point shot looked really good. Which RJ, because like that was the RJ Barrett you thought you were getting maybe after his second year in the league.
I am extremely encouraged by what we saw from RJ in the playoffs. I think to pretend like the season that we just saw, the regular season, forget before the postseason, to pretend like that didn't happen because he was not good this year, and there's no really way around that. So,
hence the Paul George talks,
yeah. I mean, do you want to stick on that for a second? I mean,
why not? I mean, I touched on it on HoopsHype. I might as well. I mean,
yeah.
Look, that was a decision for the Knicks that they had a debate. Like once. I get when they were first trying to put like Obi Toppin and Quickley in that package together with the picks. But obviously for the Clippers, that wasn't going to be ideal. And then it's like, okay, well then the flip side to that is, do you put RJ Barrett in it? Obviously for the Knicks, between that and the picks, it's like, a little too much. Paul George is older. Okay. On the flip side of that, internally, they did have to debate, well, is RJ Barrett ever going to be as good as Paul George? Does he have the upside, or is the totality of RJ the 3 picks and then having to pay Paul George, who I believe is 34, a long-term extension, even if you give him a max or not,
let's say 4-year max. I mean,
the trio,
you're $200 million into
that trio of assets it didn't do it ultimately for the Knicks, but I think it certainly raised a question there for them internally if it was worth it or not, around the draft and whatnot.
I've said repeatedly, I think if you're looking, and again, this is an important, if you're looking to have the ideal basketball player to fit between Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, which again, maybe Julius Randle's not going to be here 2 or 3, whatever years down the line. So that's, is that even a question? Do you even want to start out with that as the premise? That's one question. But if that is the premise that you're starting out with, you want to build the best team where you're putting a great player in between Brunson and Randle. I think there's no better fit than Paul, other than like maybe Kevin Durant. I don't think there's a better fit than Paul George. We know he's friends with Julius Randle. Julius went on his podcast, the whole thing. To me, that question is more, do you want to shift your timeline? Because like you just said, Jalen Brunson's in his prime right now, right? Does that mean you want to shift your timeline that far, up? Because, 5 years from now, RJ Barrett's probably going to be a more productive player than Paul George. But like maybe the Knicks are ultimately the fact that they didn't decide to go there to me says like, we're not going all in for the next 2 years. Because to me, if you trade for Paul George, that's essentially what that means, right? You're going all in for the next couple of years.
I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah, and I don't know. Is that a championship team? I think it's a damn good team. Maybe if things break right, you win a couple playoff rounds. Is that a championship team though? I don't know. Which is why, as much as I love Paul George, as much as I love fantasizing about the fit with Paul George on the Knicks,
they got a little bit of a runway. Which look, I know you and I, and probably Knicks fans, are certainly thinking that are listening to your podcast that Jalen, the time is now. But look, they could.
He's 26.
Yeah. You could wait another year, see what happens with Embiid and whatnot. Like other guys are still going to be out there in those potential trades, but we'll see. With the Knicks, they have certainly showed a level of patience.
Would you be, speaking of patience, would you be surprised if, let's say, the Clippers got off to, and again, this is why the Harden thing has everything to do with all of this, right?
Uh-huh.
If the Clippers got off to 21-20 start after the first 41 games halfway through the season, would you be surprised if we started to hear that they are perhaps more amenable to a more significant shakeup than maybe they are right now?
Well, first of all, is that with or without Harden? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
You know what?
Well, do you think Harden? Let's start there. Just again, you're not reporting. I'm asking your opinion. You have to place your chip right now. Yes or no? Is Harden starting the season as a Clipper?
You're
really thinking about this.
I am, because to me, like right now, I personally think like it's a toss up because could I see it going into camp? I could see it dragging out a little bit more. Because if you know one thing about Daryl Morey, he's going to squeeze the orange.
Sure. Yeah.
There's going to be no pulp by the time he's done, ideally. So I could see it lasting through training camp. But again, we'll see. What's funny to me about all this is it seems like with the Harden stuff, just through reporting to whoever it is, it's always like there's one report that comes out, then another couple of days later, well, he still wants out. Well, that's great, but he still wants out. There's there's trade talks. Yep. It's going to happen. He's forcing. It's like, I don't know. So, I mean, to me, the thing that what I would say, Jonathan, is the NBA operates a lot on deadlines, and I don't think there's like a firm deadline right now. So usually, like going into training camp, kind of moves the needle. Certainly before a season, moves the needle. It's not a hard deadline, but it's an inherent one. So I think the closer you get towards those dates, the better chance you have. Unless something, I don't know. There's always social media. And, and that's the other thing. And I'm not in the business of deciphering like, oh, got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I'm not into that. Guy? I'm not, I have it to like keep tabs and see whatever, but it's like, I'm not a fan of it, of just like the whole, this, cryptic message. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, so is that going to be the thing that moves the needle? Like, you remember we had like a few summers ago, like the emoji summers.
Oh, that was a while ago. That was the DeAndre Jordan? Yeah,
the rocket, Paul Pierce, I think one time had a rocket ship.
Yeah.
Somebody should have put a chair for, DeAndre Jordan that summer, but, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. I just get a kick out of it. And then, we'll be in the middle of like July or August and, I'll put out like either like if I have contract stuff or something on people, they'll be like, that's cool. Announce the trade. It's like, well, that's cool. But, it's not up to me. That's up to other, powers that be.
To bring this back to reality for a second. And what I'm like you, I don't have time for all the nonsense. However, there is so much nonsense, it seems like, from the outside looking in. I'm not, you've covered this, God knows, so close. With Harden, though, that like the fact that like, is there any other suitor that might even emerge? And I don't see that being the case. I mean, the Knicks were mentioned, but that was, it seems like that was really nothing.
Well, I mean, all right. Like, I have a couple thoughts on that. One, I never got the Suns.
No,
chatter. I never got me personally. I never got it. That was one. Two, the Knicks. I mean, sure, there's a courtesy call there.
Make a phone call,
and you can make an offer. But what are you going to trade for the guy for? If you're going to inherit the same issue that Philly has, you don't want that. So that's him using his leverage in the final year of his contract to kind of steer the ship where he wants to go, for better or worse. So it's like, sure, team's called, but he is kind of made it clear, like, all right, this is where I want to go. So,
well, if that's the case, then I'm almost thinking, again, going back to the situation with the Clippers. Let's assume he ends up there for argument's sake.
Okay.
I almost wonder if he's there and they're still struggling with him there. But then again, what are the odds of that happening? I don't know. I almost wonder if him getting traded there makes it more likely that they stick it out, or more likely that they are more amenable to, maybe again doing an additional shakeup in addition to that.
I would think stick it out, Jonathan, because at that point you make your bed, you're sleeping in it.
You're sleeping in it. Okay, I think especially if there's a pick going out
it might not be as it might be as comfortable as like a water bed or something, but you got to sleep in the bed. You make it that far, you go all in. I mean, come on.
I've never slept in a water bed. I imagine it might be comfortable, but I don't know.
I'll tell you what, if the Clippers are starting out 21-20, they, I don't know if you're returning the mattress to Sleepy's or Serta, but here we are. Well, you can get back to me on that in the middle of the year. We'll see where we're at.
I will. We went for a while on that. I wanted to touch on the Portland thing. You know what? Listen, Dame has been talked about enough. I do want to focus on Herro for a second, though, because you've done a lot of reporting on Tyler Herro. which he's a figure of interest, I feel like, for Knicks fans, because I know he wasn't actually, he was taken in the same. Yeah, that's right. I forgot for a sec. He was taken in the same draft as RJ. I feel like those two guys are compared a lot.
Sure.
I feel like the thing that they have in common, for as much as they are very different types of players, is there seems to be, again, from the outside looking in, a lack of consensus about, well, what is the value of these guys? Like, it is, so like, that's why I think the Herro situation right now is so fascinating, because clearly Portland wants, Miami to flip him somewhere for, I guess,
Portland doesn't need him. They got Simons, got
exactly.
Jaylen Sharp. Like he was never going to be a guy that fit with them.
So is Herro a guy that can fetch? Like, is there all it takes is one, right? But is there a team in the league, maybe even a team that plays down the block from us, that looks at Tyler Herro and says, we really value this guy. We're going to give up a blue chip pick, whatever you consider the most blue chip.
I don't know
pick,
if I would say a blue chip pick. I think
so that's what I'm asking you. What do you think?
Can they get like a protected first round pick of some kind? Is
that it though? That Tyler Herro is worth? That's what I'm asking.
That's my opinion.
That's your opinion. Okay.
I could see it. I mean, here's the other thing, Jonathan. We talked about like the Utah Jazz as one of the three teams, Toronto, yes, Brooklyn. And I mean, I'm sure that there are others quietly that have made calls. They just maybe haven't gotten out yet. But I think with, you look at Utah, for example, they went in on John Collins. Now, granted, sure, the return wasn't,
it's a ham sandwich.
That's fine. We'll go with we'll go with a cold cut. So for me, it's like Tyler Herro is a guy that, say what you want, but six man or not, guy's scoring 20 points a game.
That's my point. Is I think I look at him. But again, I think he's a fascinating examination because you have very legit shot creation, right? He could shoot. He's a legit shooter from deep. He could create his own shot, the whole thing. Got some passing. I mean, the passing's got a little bit better over the years, but he doesn't defend. Mm-hmm. And, is that ever going to get better? Okay, maybe not. Is he ever going to be, one of your, like a guy who's like a top two guy in terms of shot creation on a team that's really going to go all the way?
I don't think so.
So if the answer to that question is no, then it's like, all right, well, so what is he always going to be? He's always going to be a six man, right? So like, what do you?
Whether he's like a six man or a starter, and like he played both roles for Miami. His statistics were pretty much the same the past 2 years. If you look at them on like,
yes,
Basketball Reference or something, just to me, I just think like there should be a team out there that in theory would be able to give up a protected first or the equivalent of that. It's like that could mean a young player that's on a rookie scale. There's different versions of that, but when people say that stuff, especially like executives or stuff gets leaked like that, it's like it's the equivalent of it. Whether it's a decent young player that's on a controllable salary, you can keep him through restricted free agency, or protected first round pick. Like when you say blue chip to me, first round pick, that to me is a lottery pick or below. I don't see that.
Okay,
I don't see that.
So that's interesting to me.
If you want to tell me like something in the 20s, I could see that. I could see that because that's a worthwhile risk to me. His salary is what it is. It also depends on the team like the thing with the Nets is that depends on the roster construction, So
I think he's a good fit for Brooklyn with all of their wing defenders. I think.
Yeah, but the other thing with that is okay, if theoretically,
sure,
Ben Simmons was in that package, then are you really as concerned about Tyler Herro's salary? Probably not. Probably not. But if he's not, well, then you got to figure some stuff out. And then who's going? Because you got all these wing guys, the Royce O'Neals, the Dorian Finney-Smiths of the world. They just kept Cam Johnson. So, okay, then what's the moving piece there to make it work for,
Yeah, no, I hear
he's getting flipped. Utah, last year people thought okay, they're going to stink and tank. Nope, didn't happen. Danny Ainge, they were better than people thought. Lauri Markkanen became an all-star. I don't know if everybody had that on their bingo card, but, BINGO. And so it's like, okay, now you gotta You don't hold back the laugh. I could see it on your face.
It's my daughter's favorite song.
So to me, it's like, all right, now, maybe he helps with Utah. Then I don't know. Can they get off like Sexton? Maybe like it there's different variations of it. And then it's like, well, then it makes it worth maybe throwing a pick out there. There's all these like combinations and talks, and Lord knows there's way more talks that happen than all of us reporters report. Like,
well, of course. The reason I find the Brooklyn Herro situation interesting is I think it worked out for the best. I was going to say maybe I still have a little PTSD from 2019 when Durant and Kyrie picked the Nets. I look at the Nets and what they could offer in terms of a trade, in terms of all their picks, the Phoenix picks, the Dallas pick, all that stuff. Obviously, they have a lot of wings. I think the Cam Johnson contract is nice. If things do go south in Philly and the big guy does ask out, I think Brooklyn put together a hell of a package. And I wonder, what are they thinking? What is their timeline? Are they thinking along the same lines as the Knicks? Like, we're just biding our time. And when the whale, when we see the whale, we're going to jump. Yeah.
Brooklyn, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, Brooklyn. And how might getting Herro, does Herro make them considerably better this year as like kind of that self-creation threat alongside Mikal Bridges? That's why I think it's funny how all this is interconnected.
Okay. So I think for Brooklyn, regarding like Tyler Herro, again, like the impression that I've always heard was it was about the roster construction. Now, you wouldn't get further details like that, but if you read between the lines, that would imply that potentially, if you're moving off Ben Simmons' contract, maybe. Yeah. But I mean, look, at the same time, Ben Simmons has looked healthier. And listen, but Jonathan, like I watched him all last year. He couldn't move.
Okay.
Back was messed up.
He can move now.
So I'm not saying whether to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I am telling you the guy could not move as well. Clear, and it was clear as day. He started to get a rhythm maybe after the 20-25 game mark, but then there were lapses there, and he ultimately obviously needed the surgery, which you don't do unless like you really need it. That's not like a small surgery. So for Brooklyn, when you're asking like kind of big picture, I don't know if it's Embiid in particularly, but they did bring back picks and they learned from the Durant, Kyrie experience and Harden experience that it's about getting the right star. And so for Brooklyn, like Mikal Bridges being there as a guy they feel is a foundational piece. They obviously like Cam Johnson. But Nick Claxton's a very intriguing center. And I do think eventually he's going to get a bag in free agency. He was a guy that, when they had the big three and they were good, it was certainly top 5 in defensive player of the year conversation. Then, whatever, the team got worse. So with Joe Tsai, I don't think you can ever rule out talks for a star player and Sean Marks because they have the assets like you talked about. But also, like, look at Joe Tsai with the Liberty, okay? I'm being serious. Like in the WNBA, like they have a trio of star players. Clearly, and they had that with the Nets for a brief time. Clearly, that's you said it, not me, but yes,
I'm happy to shit on the Nets any day of the week.
Well,
but on a serious note, I say this stuff not to as a hot take. I fear the Nets. I fear them as far as I do think that there is legitimately good stuff that happens in that organization. I do. They're
certainly calculated.
Yeah, like obviously the KD and Kyrie thing blew up in their faces, and which is when you go into business with those guys, that's the risky run. And it did not work out very well.
Well, I'll say this: KD, like that was a package deal.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
So, I mean, for them, did I?
Come on.
With Kyrie, it's like, look, you don't think certain people in the Nets were like, is this ideally what you want to do? You don't think they did their background due diligence? It was like, you get Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and then you figure it out. And then when they got Harden, the whole league was shook. Everybody was crying boo-hoo that they got like LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin in the buyout market. Never forget.
I remember that.
You got Mike James throwing lobs off the backboard to people. Like it was a wild time. It was 16 games. God bless. There's going to be a 30 for 30 on it. I guarantee it.
On the 500 minutes that they played together or whatever it was. I don't even know.
I mean, it was the greatest. It was the greatest trio that never was for long. And obviously part of that was Kyrie with the vaccine, Nash as the coach, which that totally changed everything. But I'm sure
they learned some lessons.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting you bring them up for Embiid. I kind of touched on it a little bit on HoopsHype that, ironically, depending on what happens with Damian Lillard, and honestly, either way, I think to an extent, if Bam Adebayo's still on the Heat,
I saw you said something about that. Yeah.
And it's just like, theoretically.
They would trade him, though.
I'm just saying, theoretically, Jonathan, think of it like, what if you're the Sixers, then what better piece would you get back as a center than Bam? I'm just saying from an optics standpoint that
the Sixers would love that. I'm not saying from a Sixers perspective. I'm saying, is Miami really giving up Bam?
But if you're Miami also, Embiid and Jimmy Butler have a relationship. I'm just saying, if you ever felt like you needed to make that move, you could. They're both good defensive players. I know Bam, look, here's the thing. Joel Embiid's the MVP. I also don't want to make this black and white, but at the end of the day, when you say would Miami trade, Bam Adebayo, I don't know yet. I'm just saying as a theoretical. But we're not talking about an average center. You're talking about the MVP. It's like him and Jokic are the two best centers in the NBA. And you can flip a coin if you want. It depends what the price would be to upgrade. I'm just saying. But I just don't think, looking ahead down the line, if Embiid ever wanted out, I don't think you can count out the Miami Heat. And that's what I wrote. I stand by that 100%.
Nobody, as Andrew is my witness, nobody has more respect, legitimate respect, all joking aside, for Pat Riley and what he's built down there than me. All right. We have about 10 minutes left. We have directly talked about the Knicks, even though we've been dancing around it. Let's get a couple quick ones.
Sure.
DiVincenzo, it seemed like it was a fait accompli the whole way that he was going to end up in New York. Seemed like it was one of the worst kept secrets in the NBA.
Yeah.
Any insight you have to offer there? I love him. I think he's going to be a good fit. I think he's a good player. What do you, anything on DiVincenzo you want to share?
Yeah. Hey, did you know that he played at Villanova with those guys? Wow. Who could have heard that? Yeah, I know. Shocking. Yeah. It would look, the Knicks had to spend their money. That was the guy. It was all along. I think it's just interesting that it's all right. Now they're overloaded a little bit at that guard spot.
Absolutely.
And
they're a little small.
Yeah. And it's okay, so is Josh Hart going to play some small ball 4 now? That's something they're going to have to figure out. I think they looked at a lot of other people too. They did look at Bruce Brown, but once the Pacers broke the bank, that was done. And then they did look at Yuta Watanabe a little bit, which I thought was interesting.
I liked him. I didn't think that was the way they'd go, but I like him.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what? I said the same thing at first, but at the end of the day, for them, brings shooting, definitely more size than Dante DiVincenzo. Not that it would have been one or the other, but you know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
As part of, because right now you're okay, you move Obi Toppin, you got a little bit of a hole at the 4. You got Isaiah Roby playing that. They got to figure that out, I think, just as much as anything. That and Quickley, what his future.
Well, I want to get back to Quickley. So I wanted to finish on Quickley because you've done a lot of reporting on Quickley too. But in regards to figuring out maybe the backup 4, my theory all along, which will probably not shock you, is that if the Knicks had their druthers in their dream world, OG Anunoby would have gone on the table this summer and they would have been able to put together a package for OG, because the nice thing about OG, and there are other players who fit this description, but I think OG is probably the best one. That's not a star. Well, maybe OG will become a star player, but you get my drift. As someone who could be a starting 3, obviously, but then slide seamlessly into, he's also your backup 4, and you kind of kill two birds with one stone. What's the trade package there? We could get into a whole thing. I don't want to waste time on it because, and this is what I want to ask you, it seems like he's not on the table by the reporting that I've seen, at least. Do you buy that Toronto is just going to continue like holding their cards and
well, I mean,
what do you think's going on there?
I mean, look, Toronto certainly dangles their guys. There's no question about that. They've done it.
What does that mean? Like dangles, like
you talk to any executive around the league, they'll tell you like Toronto has always like dangled their guys. If in terms of like Siakam's name has been out there. No, you haven't seen Masai. You haven't seen Masai or Bobby Webster or anybody come out and say he's off the table.
No, we have
you never. And with OG's name came out there a bunch of times. 3 first-round picks got floated out there for him. That wasn't enough. Well, if that's not enough, then I don't know what is. To be honest with you,
so that's
because then the other thing now, Jonathan, is like you got to pay this guy eventually. He's up for an extension. And he's going to get probably more. And so the other thing you have too is him switching agencies.
Who did he switch to? I may have missed that one.
You could throw it out there. I'll let you go ahead. Knicks fans know.
Yeah, no, everybody knows. It's hint. It's 3 letters long. No, so like, but to me, that was like.
I'll tell you this. Yeah. Steph Bondy touched on it. I know that it's true, but it's like you think Clutch is trying to get guys to the Knicks right now after the Cam Reddish situation. Like, nah, it left a little bit of a bad taste, in their mouth. So now it's like, okay, OG was with them, not anymore. That to me, that also doesn't mean to me that you just automatically assume, okay, he's going to the Knicks.
No, I didn't mean to imply that.
Not you. I'm just saying I've seen NBA Twitter and Knicks, and like I get it. It's a funny joke, but I mean, if you're Toronto,
I just think he's a great fit. I like him as a fit. Talk about another guy who'd be a good fit between Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle.
Yeah, of course. I think OG would fit on a lot of teams. I just think with Toronto, they got to figure out what are they doing with Pascal. Really, that's the domino, because to me, with Fred, they've lost guys before. They lost Kawhi Leonard for nothing. They lose Fred for nothing. I know they signed Dennis Schroeder, but it's like, all right. I mean, to me, with OG, it almost sounds like it's got to be like a Godfather offer. If 3 first-round picks weren't enough before, what's it going to take?
Well, that's all well and good, but again, you just
and if you're the Knicks, why would you do that, Jonathan? At this point,
well, I don't think I would. I think what I would do is I would wait until next summer. Now, obviously, the Knicks aren't going to have cap space, but if OG is able to just walk, and there's a sign and trade possible, if the situation facing Toronto, then, which I guess would not be that dissimilar to the situation that was facing them this summer, right? If you got a guy who it's like, we either figure out a sign and trade or we lose him for nothing. I'm still surprised they didn't do a sign and trade for VanVleet, but I guess you just didn't have to, so there was no.
They kept Podol, so they want to keep winning. Jakob Poeltl, excuse me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to look at the Toronto people I talked to, there's Knicks fans, are looking at the Toronto situation and Masai in particular, be like, are we sure this guy's like has as good of a handle on everything as
I mean, you could
believe,
and you can keep OG and he's still young. Like he fits their timeline.
Sure, he's good. There's a reason I want him on the Knicks. He's a damn good player. What else did I want to hit? Oh, 2 things, quick thing, because we got to get out of here. You mentioned Quickley. 2 quick things. Do you think it gets done before the deadline? I mean, those sorts of deals we know are
way too early.
Yeah,
I'm being honest with you. Way too early.
But if gut feeling, do you think? Well, let me ask you this: if it gets done with the Knicks, if it gets done, he's on the Knicks. Nothing else happens over the next several months, and the extension gets done with the Knicks. What is a range of money that you foresee happening for that annual value?
Oh, well, I touched on. I mean, I think the floor is you're in the $20 million range, so a year annually. Could it be a little bit more with incentives and things like that? Could.
Knicks love their incentives.
Hey, I mean, look, so did the Nets with the Cam Johnson thing. When it first came out, like $108 million, it almost broke like NBA Twitter before Elon Musk did. And then instead, it was like 90, 93, like I had, in that range with incentives that were likely, like as I reported, it makes you look at it differently. For Quickley, there's still a lot of time there and a lot of talks to be had. They've got to figure it out. They got to decide if they have that appetite for around 20 million or more.
I would happily pay Emmanuel Quickley $20 million. We'll see if him and his representatives are amenable to that. Last thing, you had what I consider to be just one of the most interesting reports of the summer, because it made so much sense after you reported it, is the proposed three-way deal that fell apart between Indiana. It was Indiana, San Antonio, right? And the Knicks, where Fournier.
No, Phoenix.
Indiana. Oh, that's right. Sorry, Phoenix. My bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure.
Yeah, Fournier is would have gone to Indy. Knicks take campaign into what I'm imagining.
Yeah, the Suns would have gotten McConnell.
Yeah, and the Knicks taking Payne into the Obi traded player exception.
Yep.
Just in regards to me, that let me know that they are clearly still trying to figure out a way to parlay Evan Fournier into something that can benefit them. In that instance, it would have been
an expiring contract, and they absolutely should.
Yeah, so that's what I want to ask you. Do you think they will be successful? Do you think there is someone that will eventually have the appetite around the league to say this is we like having this $19 million expiring contract on our books?
I think so. And also, like, everybody wants shooting. And I know he sat the bench a lot in New York last year, but Evan Fournier can shoot the ball. I do think somebody will trade for him. I think bigger picture, as we get ready to wrap up, is, for the Suns, obviously they were trying to move campaign. It happened. And for the Pacers, I think you got to look out for TJ McConnell now.
I love TJ McConnell. I would not mind seeing him in a Knicks uniform someday. Not going to happen this summer, though, probably. All right. I've kept you for too long as it is. I got to go. You got to run. Michael Scotto, in case anybody listening somehow does not know where to find you and your reporting and all of the stuff that you do, let them know. Appreciate it, brother. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Mike A. Scotto. The HoopsHype podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We'll have a new episode out this week. You can find me on hoopshype.com as well, where all else fails.